Welcome everyone to the Superwomen channel. So we are doing a series of sessions offering tips and advice for people working in the TV, film and broadcast industries. It's kind of stating the obvious here, but money is a big worry during COVID-19. So this time we are speaking to Stacey Lowman, who's a financial advisor. Hi Stacey, how are you doing and how is lockdown treating you?
Hi, yeah, taking it day by day, really, like everybody else. But it's been so lovely to connect with communities like yours, and offer some support and guidance at times like this. So yeah, I've actually been really busy, but it's felt great.
Yeah, it's now more than ever, like, so important. It's amazing that people like you exist that can help people, freelancers and self-employed like Georgie and I, and a lot of our audience are either freelance or self-employed in TV and broadcasting, and yeah, just a hugely insecure time. So tell us, what you're a financial coach. What is that, and how did you come to be one?
Yeah, sure. So I talk about myself as a money and financial well-being coach. So it's like a life coach, but for your finances. So I talk about helping people define what it means to be good with money for you. So typically, if you think about someone who's good with money, you might think of someone who earns a lot of money, or knows how the stock market works, or knows how to make more money. Whereas I actually think the role that money plays in your life is a lot more holistic than that. So instead, it's thinking about, what does good look like for you, given where you are and what sort of lifestyle you want, and how much you want to know about money and interact with money, and how can you set up your finances in a way that you feel as comfortable and in control as possible, but not restrained and constrained by it. So like lifestyle leading first, and then how can money be one resource that you can use to have that lifestyle that you want. So I trained to be a financial coach in 2016. I was in investment banking and investment management for 10 years. So then in the last few years, I did my training and certifications and started testing it with like individual coaching sessions, groups of women, going into schools and organizations. And then at the end of 2018, I quit my corporate job and started doing this more full time, or dove into the freelance space full time. So this is my second year. I guess it's important when we talk about financial coaching to say what it's not. So it's not financial advice in the regulatory sense of the word. So I wouldn't go to somebody and say, oh, based on your specific circumstances, this is where you should invest your money or get this specific product. It's a lot more life coachy and holistic than that, and more about the relationship with money. So I can help to explain what different investment products are, or different finance products are, what the pros and cons are, but then I leave it to you guys to make your own decisions on specific things to buy or invest in. So yes.
And do you work with a lot of freelancers?
I do, yeah, I do. Both one-on-one and in groups, but it really varies. So my clients are from 16-year-old kids, vulnerable young people, to then freelancers and creatives, people who have just graduated, and then like founders and startup leaders and everything in between. So yeah, but freelancers is a really juicy one that I really like to work with, because our situation is so individual, so uncertain, and we're having to deal with lots of flexibility with our finances. So I really love working with freelancers.
And because I know a lot of people in, certainly in TV, I'm not sure if it's the same in broadcasting, Georgie, but, sometimes you might be self-employed where you're invoicing your employer, or you might be freelance where you don't have a kind of long contract, but you're PAYE. Could you just explain like what the differences are and how that works?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of if you can set yourself up as like a sole trader, or as like of your limited company. So yeah, you can choose to set yourself up in different legal ways, or those two legal structures, you're sole trader or you can be a company director. Or if you're like employed but consistently with certain clients, you can set yourself up through PAYE. It really just depends on what feels right for you and how regular your income streams are. If you're obviously doing invoicing and everything yourself, then it often means a lot more admin on your part in terms of keeping your own records and keeping up to date and chasing all of the invoices and setting yourself up in that way. I talk a lot about the emotional tax of doing that, as well as paying the actual tax, because you're taking a lot of that admin and burden on yourself as a freelancer, which takes up so much more time than you think it's going to take up. Regardless of what structure you set yourself up as, I think it's always worth having an accountant that you trust and that really understands you as a person, and how you're structured and how you want your business to run and how much you want to lean on them as an individual. So the relationship with your accountant as a freelancer is incredibly important. So I always advise that you have, sessions with like free calls or introductory meetings with a number of accountants, speak to freelancers who have a similar setup to you and what their relationship's like with their accountant, and really get to know your accountant as an individual as well as just somebody who files your tax return, because they can really help you with the emotional and admin tax of setting yourself up in different ways.
I've always freelanced, so I'm on like a casual contract at the BBC, but then everything else is self-employed and freelance, so I'm constantly chasing invoices. And I went to a freelancing kind of seminar, and they said a couple of really good bits of advice, but one of them was you'll only work 80% of the time as a freelancer, so you need to manage your money. So it's like tot up how much money you need per month and then divide it by 10 months of the year so that it covers you for the time that you're not working. But obviously right now it's like, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. It could be 3 months. It could be not earning any money. I think a lot of freelance careers are kind of ground to a bit of a halt because we can't shoot, we can't, go and do stuff in presenting, or I can't go out and DJ a gig. It's like none of the events are happening, none of the festivals are happening. So what advice would you have when it seems really overwhelming and kind of like another job in itself, managing your finances? What's the best way to approach it?
Yeah, so I think when there's so much uncertainty, often the last thing we want to do is look at our numbers. If we're really scared of them and we think, I'm not going to be able to afford to live for the next few months, that can be a really frightening concept. Whereas actually it's one place where we can have some certainty right now is looking at our own actual financial situation. And because of the way that the working environment is in the UK and how we've been taught to think about our careers, kind of an inherent assumption that we have is being good with money is making more money, or at least as much money as you did last month or last year. So your kind of unconscious benchmark for what a good income is what I was earning last month or last quarter or last year. And if you're not earning that, all of a sudden you start to panic. And that's because we get used to lifestyle inflation, right? So the cost of living tends to go up with how much money we earn, whereas actually we're very adaptable humans, and if we start to earn less, we'll have lifestyle deflation as well, and our costs are likely to go down. So what I suggest at a time like this is reframe what your income expectations are and think to yourself, rather than I'm not earning as much money anymore, oh my gosh, default into panic mode, think, okay, let me go back to the basics of what I'm going to need and what my must-have costs are for the next few months. And then whatever that sum comes to, that becomes your new benchmark of, okay, so long as I make that for the next few months, that might be okay. And then you just figure out your calculations of how much am I actually going to need. So you write down all of your must-have spends, go through each one, see if you can cut them down to a minimum through negotiations, through getting financial support from the government, through having payment holidays, various things like that. And then seeing what am I actually going to need in the next few months, and then being, trying to make that much money. And then if you do that, then that's a successful income for a while. And when we get out the back of this situation, which we will do at some point, then reframing your income expectations again to a different benchmark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's such an interesting perspective, because I think like certainly in the past, my very bad strategy has been, I don't really want to think about that. I'm just going to like pretend that's not happening and not really deal with my finances, and just sort of just go on. But actually what you're saying is especially in these uncertain times, a way to kind of feel like you have a sense of control is to actually, even if it's scary, is to just look at them and budget and deal with it and plan. And that in itself, even though you don't know when the money's going to be coming in, that in itself is going to make you feel better about your finances.
Yeah. And I think it's slightly edgy, especially for female freelancers, because we are always very afraid of being under earners or not earning as much or valuing our skills as highly enough for like the contribution that we make. So it is a strategy which is useful for very specific scenarios like the one we're in now. But obviously it's, we might be for a while not charging as much as what we're actually worth. But given that it's not just, this is a situation that's affecting everybody, like our clients, our suppliers, any organization that we're working with, having empathy and understanding and just doing enough for all of us to get by for a while is probably a short-term strategy that we all have to sign up to for now.
What are the common,
Go on.
you go. Okay. What are the common mistakes that you see freelancers and self-employed people making with their money?
One of them is definitely not factoring in how much time they're going to be spending doing the work around the work. So like you said before, thinking about those overheads when you're charging and offering prices for work. So definitely thinking about the overall cost of you doing this work. So making sure any day rates that you charge or any project prices that you put together, including the cost of the work around the work. So hustling for the work in the first place, all of the promotion and marketing you're doing to like land those sorts of clients, all of the chasing of invoices and tax reporting that you're going to do as a result of it, making sure that you're covering your time for all of that work. And then not saving whilst times are good and putting money aside every time that you get paid for your tax and national insurance contributions, if you want to be contributing to your pension, if you want to be building up an emergency fund. So saving as you earn, which is an incredibly difficult message right now, because we might feel guilt and shame as a freelancer who is now in a very difficult financial situation because of COVID-19, and we're not as perhaps financially prepared or not have the savings that we think we might need, and we feel guilty around that. But none of us could have anticipated like the scale and the speed of the impact of COVID-19, especially on our finances. So I don't want freelancers to be feeling guilty about not having savings now, but in general business as usual life, it is something that we tend not to think about is, am I putting enough money aside for my taxes, my national insurance, any investments or pension contributions I want to make? So when we can do that, it is good to do that, so we have buffers for difficult times.
And yeah, as you say, it's so hard, isn't it, to even be able to save for like a holiday or something that you might need, and then you have a period of not working, and then all of that money gets eaten up just for living costs. I mean, what kind of tips do you have just for generally being able to save, and not necessarily with like a some kind of cost in mind, but just generally?
Yeah. So when it comes to savings, it's like thinking about your own behaviors and what you're like as an individual, and then adopting a savings behavior that is aligned to like your typical lifestyle. So if you're naturally quite a risk averse person, you might be able to transfer a certain amount of savings the day that you get paid into a separate account and keep it there. some people find that really difficult and continue to dip into it. And then that just means that they think, oh, I'm rubbish at saving, I'm not going to save at all. So if you find that type of savings difficult, then you might want to try like the savings as you spend. So, you know, like some rounding up spare change, and like Monzo, Moneybox, various products allow you to do that now, where if you find it difficult to save, then try and find a product that does it automatically for you, where you don't need to think about it. Or it's the case of coming up with a percentage that you're happy with. So a typical or a classic budgeting technique is the 50-30-20, where you kind of estimate how much your monthly or your annual income is going to be. Assume 50% of that is going to be on your like fixed costs or your must-have spending, and then 30% is what you should be aiming to put away, and then 20% is your like guilt-free spending on everything else. So if you put your numbers into a 50-30-20 model, does that 30% figure feel something that's doable for you? And is that something you can stick to? I think also with savings is it becomes an addictive habit. Once you start to see it build up, it becomes addictive. So don't try and save too much and then it feels unachievable and you don't reach it and you think, oh, I'm rubbish at saving, and you give up. Put the behavior in place before you think you have enough money to save. So even if it's just £5 or £10 a week or a month, whatever you can afford, put a small amount in consistently and frequently, and then as you start to see that number go up and you can see that you can stick to the behavior, then you can change the figure and increase it, and obviously increase your savings as well. So putting a behavior in place that you find yourself consistently sticking to, and then the numbers will follow.
It's quite scary because I think I've been caught out before where my tax bill comes in and it's bigger than I thought, because I've done that thing where I've avoided it because I'm scared of the repercussions and actually what it's going to be. And then I haven't saved enough, I haven't put enough money aside, and then you get caught out and it's bigger than you have to, and you've got to try and find a way, and then basically just means that you're skint for a couple of months. When you're living a bit hand to mouth, which can be the case, you know, obviously we have better months and we have months where we're not, you know, bringing in as much money, and there's the quiet times in the year, like January for freelancers is usually really quiet. How do you plan for it? How do you try and get better at doing it?
Yeah, so it's really hard. Like if you're not in the habit already, the first few months of starting to dig yourself out of any hole is really, really difficult. And sometimes we want to find a silver bullet, but there's no way around it apart from cutting ruthlessly on your costs for a couple of months. If that means doing it with others and having like accountability buddies, or setting those expectations with people that you usually spend money with or you're used to a certain lifestyle with, trying to do it as a group all together so you have a sense of like camaraderie around it. I would also say, what else might help you get into the habit? I mean, given where we are right now in COVID-19, it's a very, very scary position to be in for lots of us because our work has dried up. If we reframe that, we have this very like precious time where we're self-isolating and we can't spend in a way that we used to be spending. So it's an opportunity for us to really reflect on our life before COVID-19 and our spending habits before COVID-19, and think to ourselves, what was I spending money on that I'm really missing? And what was I spending money on that I'm actually not missing that much? And of those things that you're not missing that much, how can you capture that and perhaps not spend money on that going forward in the future? Now you've got this moment of reflection to think about what parts of my lifestyle were costing me money that I'm not missing, and actually how can I capture that lifestyle change going forward and use that as savings somehow. So looking back at, say, our December, January, February bank statements, and just spending like half an hour going through and highlighting, like, why was I spending so much money on that? Like, I don't miss it too much, or I didn't realize that cost me so much. And just add it all up and look at that number and think, how else would I better want to save or use or make the most of that amount of money? And is this a unique opportunity right now to capture that? Because it is a time for us to pause and reflect and change our lifestyle habits. And we think, okay, I want to use more of my money in a conscious way. So it's a nice checkpoint that we might have right now to start putting more conscious money habits in place.
You're right. It's for me, it's like you just put, because it's a bit of plastic, you just end up putting, you know, tap 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 and tap things. And I've found, like, I've made a coffee in my flat like every morning, and I actually didn't have a coffee for about 4 or 5 days. Just didn't. I don't know why. I just didn't. And it's like those things where I just impulsively, because there's a little bean about town at the station, and I just tapped down, and that's probably like £4 that I could have saved. So it is, yeah, there's definitely things that I'm thinking about that I'm like, I could really rein some things in and change those habits so that when I come out the other side, I'm just less frivolous about it.
Yeah, totally. It will like really make a difference. Again, it's something that I'm conscious about promoting as the key message, especially for women, because a lot of finance content out there focused at women is about cut your spending down and don't buy so many avocados and coffee. And then for men, it's a lot more like, this is how you earn more money, this is how you start investing. But given where we are in COVID-19, it is a really unique time for us to look at our lifestyle, where we're spending, but also how we're earning money, how we're saving money, where we're saving money. If we wanted to start investing, what that could look like, and just reflect on all changes, like macro and micro changes to our lifestyle and how they could impact our overall financial situation. And if that's as little as stopping my regular coffee, great. If that's as big as I'm going to start saving into an ISA for a house deposit one day, or I'm going to think about how I charge and what I charge for my services and freelance projects, also great. This is just a really unique time for us to reflect on all aspects of our financial lives.
Well, that's such good advice. One of the things that I find is I'll like sit down, say at the beginning of every month when I get paid, and I'll like do a budget. And then I kind of forget that I've done the budget, and things come in throughout the month that I wasn't expecting that I have to spend money on. And then I just maybe don't get time to update the budget or whatever. And it just kind of just runs away from me. What kind of tips do you have for keeping on top of those things?
Yeah, so budgeting is really, really helpful. Some of us need to reframe it so it doesn't feel like a restraint or we're setting ourselves up to fail every month, because that just feels rubbish and means we're not going to stick to it anyway. It's about, again, starting as small as we need to consistently stick to it and then build it up from there. So perhaps if it's like, okay, this month I'm just going to focus on really understanding what my must-have spending is, and like automating and simplifying that as much as possible. Okay, next month I'm really going to focus on like any surprises that came up this month and look back when the month's finished, look back, see what really surprised me, how much did they come to. Okay, I'm either going to budget for those and expect them to happen, so then, you know, budget money for that, or I'm going to consciously try and not make those things happen. But it's just like, budgeting shouldn't be about, okay, at the start of the month I'm going to plan this, and then at the end of the month, did I achieve it or not? It's seeing it as like a constantly iterative process where you're like testing and trialing and experimenting different things, and just doing it in a way that really works for you, that you can stick to. And it might not make sense to anybody else, but if it fits your situation, then that's great.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at the whole government grants, there's the, I've forgotten the name of it, but there's the kind of basic one that you can apply for, and then there's going to be help for self-employed, and they say I think up to 80% of your earnings if you earn up to 50 grand a year or something like that. I'm sure you'll be able to detail a little bit more. Do you have faith that the government are really going to help people like us who, you know, we don't have paid income coming in at the moment, not in any way what we were earning.
Yeah. So I think, like, personally, I think the government have done more than I was expecting. There is always people who are going to fall through the gaps, and there's always like areas that they perhaps could do more, like, for example, company directors who pay themselves through dividends and not an income. They're currently a group that have fallen through the gaps. I think right now it's a really interesting time that has leveled the playing field across society. So all of a sudden, like, the benefit system that we thought was for very few, that had some like negative stereotypes attached to it, we now find areas of society, typically like middle class or people who are fortunate enough to design and build their own freelance career, and now looking to the government to support them. And I think it's a really nice, humbling like opportunity for society to think about how vulnerable a lot of us can be, and be in a situation where we do need benefits, and then realizing just how difficult it is to live off the benefits that the government provide to people. So I think a lot of the support that they're offering through furlough or through the self-employment income support scheme is more than I was expecting would happen. But yeah, I think for individuals who have all of a sudden seen their income wiped out through like their freelance career totally drying up, there are some opportunities available through support. So through the income support scheme, through like the business interruptions loans, through even universal credit, it can all help. So if you have an accountant, this is when moments like this, accountants become invaluable, like really leaning on them to understand the rules and what am I eligible for. Some of the grants on offer, you can still work on your business whilst receiving the grant, others you can't. If you do need support, and it will be on a case-by-case basis, if the government or HMRC or any financial providers like your bank ask you for evidence, it's definitely worth collating any evidence you have from any clients on paper or on email that you can prove that you've lost income. So if you need evidence, you can provide that. But yeah, going through, like, again, spending an hour sitting down and going through the rules, and if you're eligible, there's amazing online calculators out there now that can say, like, yes, you're eligible for this, and no, you're not eligible for this one. But I think I've been pleasantly surprised so far. Like, I was, before the self-employed support came out a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I lose track of days now, I thought it was just a real error and like a mission on the government's part, because it's like 15% of our economy is through freelance employment or something crazy. So when they bought out like a parity offering of the 80% up to £2,500 a month as what employed people on furlough will receive, I thought that was good.
Yeah, I've got some friends in Germany, in Berlin, who work in the creative industry, and they just got deposited €5,000 into their €5,000 into their bank now. That happened this week. But with us, it's like, oh yeah, you know, the government will get in touch with you and maybe pay this money. But in June, like, that doesn't help. I've got to pay a mortgage. I've got to pay all of my outgoings a month now. So what advice would you have there for people that are in this situation where it's like, okay, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, so if you are eligible for the self-employment income support scheme, but obviously you don't get that until June, there are other things that you can do. So you can apply for the business interruption loan or universal credit, and you can get those before June. If you can also delay any tax payments. So if you were going to pay half of your tax in July, that's been postponed until January. So if you had savings allocated for that tax payment, perhaps you could use those to temporarily get you through until June. And then all of your must-have costs, call every single financial provider and see what they're offering you. So if you can get a payment holiday on your mortgage or your rent, case by case basis on all of your different bills, but lots of bill providers are offering holidays or breaks on overdrafts up until £500. So long as they're pre-existing and arranged, you won't pay interest on those, so you can leverage any overdraft facility if you need to temporarily. Any other savings that you had put by for other things, if you can repurpose those for a while. But calling every organisation that you have a financial relationship with and just cutting ruthlessly for the next few months, so you really minimise your costs.
Brilliant, thank you. What are there specific apps or programs that you use or you recommend using to help with like saving and also budgeting, planning?
Yeah, sure. So well, I use a spreadsheet for all of mine, and I can send you guys the link if that would be helpful.
Yes.
So anyone's very welcome to look at that. But it works differently for everybody in terms of what budgeting works for them. So I think Money Saving Expert is such a classic place, but I think the way that they have explained the rights and support available for every different type of self-employed, employed, freelancer, company director, 0-hour contract worker has been excellent and is really very clear. There's a company called Crunch Accounting in Brighton who have also set up all of the rights and support available really well on their website. And Turn to Us and Step Change as financial education charities to support people who are struggling financially. They have online calculators that you can fill out with your own information to say what you might be eligible for. And then apps, budgeting apps that are good are things like Yolt. Clio is like an AI, so you can like chat to it like WhatsApp, and it will tell you this is what bills you've got coming up. If you need to go down to even like day by day, there's like a daily budget planner and Squirrel that look at like your daily outgoings and work out how much you can afford to spend each day. And Money Dashboard is also good. Because of the competition from new like challenger banks and like improvements in technology, the banking apps themselves have become like very advanced with budgeting support. So Monzo is very well known. Starling is also very good. I think NatWest are increasingly offering like rounding up spare change and similar sorts of features to online challenger banks. So getting familiar with what your own bank can offer you through their app and what features are available. There's a lot more empathy in the financial industry right now for all of us who are struggling financially. So calling your banks and just saying, this is my situation, what can you do to help me, what can you do to help me? And if you're not happy with what your bank are doing, then you can switch. Now is also a good time to try other providers that are more suited to, you know, have features that are suited to your lifestyle and your own money situation. So looking at the competition out there.
And also pensions, the P word, which I'm in fear of, because pension pot at the moment is nada, which is a shocking thing 12 years into my career, but I just haven't been able to do it, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in the same boat. What would you say on that? You know, should everyone, is it a must to have your own private pension pot? How should you approach it?
So I mean, obviously it would be amazing for everybody to have a pension, everyone to be saving into their ISA, and everyone to have an emergency fund. So I would say, however small, starting a pension is very helpful. However little that you can afford to put into it. But I think as our generation now are also thinking about, with so much uncertainty, with things like with the climate crisis, with things like global pandemics, with increasing uncertainty throughout our career, with an aging population and the like pension ages only ever like increasing, are we ever going to be retired? So increasingly we are thinking as a generation about saving for our future in other ways. So a house is obviously a typical way that people think about saving for their future, or different types of savings. I think that a pension offers lots of tax benefits that you don't get through other types of savings products. So it's a good way to save. And you can currently access private pensions from the age of 55 rather than the state pension age. So it's money that you could potentially get to retire early if you were in that fortunate position. So again, it's saving what you can into those sorts of schemes is very positive. We often put off saving into a pension because we think, oh, I'm never going to have enough to retire anyway, so what's the point? Or I don't have enough money to save into a pension. Whereas actually with like online investment platforms these days, you can invest like as little as £1 into those sorts of schemes. So again, don't worry or don't think about, I don't have enough now. Just saving as little and often and getting into the habit and letting the money grow later is a good thing to start doing.
So I guess I mean, I know that I'm guilty of this myself, but a lot of people just think, oh, I'm just bad at finances, like, you know, I'm just terrible and it's never going to change. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that, and stress. Is there a way of kind of changing that sort of negative self-talk to, I don't know, just change your perspective around money? And do you see just that perspective shift as actually making us better at approaching how we deal with our finances?
Yeah, definitely. I think our money mindset has a much bigger impact on our overall financial situation in the long term. Changing it to have a positive money mindset is a much more powerful technique that leads to improving our financial situation than understanding the kind of technicalities of money. So people will often ask me, where's the best place to save, or like what interest rate shall I go after, or shall I buy this investment or this investment? Whereas those sorts of things are useful to know, but if you have this underlying story that I'm terrible with money, then your everyday habits won't necessarily change. And it's actually thinking I can be good with money, and recognizing that it's not the fancy technical stuff that's going to have a big impact on your overall financial situation in the long term if you're not having positive, consistent, regular money habits now, and putting those boring everyday habits in place, and then over time learning the technical stuff. That's where the big shift happens. So we often say like really unhelpful generic statements to ourselves, like I'm really bad with money. Whereas actually money is, you can break it down into lots of different components. And you could say, oh, so I'm really good with money because I have a relatively high income, or I'm really good at hustling for freelance clients, or I'm good with money because I've set up an emergency fund, or I'm learning about my pension, or I'm really bad with money because I spend on coffees every day, or I'm bad with money because I never save for my tax. And actually breaking it down and saying to yourself, oh, so I am good with money in these ways, I'm bad with money in these ways, getting really specific about those things, and then tackling each of them one at a time. And then recognizing that the stories we tell ourselves about money are just those, they are just stories. And it's often the story that influences the behavior rather than the behavior influencing the story. So thinking about what the reframe is. So saying, oh, that's just a story that I'm telling myself about money. Actually, the evidence shows that I'm really good here and I'm not so good here. So if I change this, then I'll be good with money in this way. And then I'm going to work on that bit. So yeah. It's recognizing what's unhelpful stories we tell ourselves and how we can reframe them, and also what unhelpful comparisons we make about money too. So there's always going to be someone who's better with money than you and thinking that's an unhelpful comparison. Actually, it's more helpful for me to compare where I was this time last year, or that, you know, they've had an advantage in this way or that way, and actually I've done really well from this situation. And pinpointing specifically where you have been good with money and capturing and celebrating those moments, and then working more specifically on the bits that you want to change.
I've also found for the kind of anxiety level of it, like quite a few years ago, I got an accountant involved, because she just said, look, some people are good with numbers, some aren't. Take the pressure off. Don't worry about it. You know, it will make you feel better not having to freak out about the tax return every year, and having someone else kind of involved to just help keep check on it. You know, in terms of accountants, you know, should we employ one? Do you know what the average cost a year is of having an accountant to do your tax return and help you with that?
Yeah, so I think if you're like a sole trader, you would expect anything from like £100 to £200 a year for them to just file your return. I think as soon as you start going into like a limited company structure, expect like 400 up at least. But you can find as a sole trader an amazing accountant for like 150 quid a year.
Good to know.
And what kind of, like, other than just sort of because so I'll, like, you know, save all my receipts and file my tax return, and in some cases they'll, you know, my accountant will tell me, oh yeah, you can put this through, or you're not thinking about this. I mean, what other kind of advice could an accountant give you, and how could they potentially be saving you money?
Yeah, so I think they could save you money in various different ways, like suggesting the best like system and platforms that you can use to minimize the amount of time that you're spending on your accounting and your admin, because obviously for freelancers time is money, and we could be spending that time doing other things. So when I signed up with my accountant, she was like, right, go on this platform, use Receipt Bank for all of your receipts, send me all of your old statements for the previous tax year, and I'll update that all automatically into the system for you, so I don't have to spend any sort of time doing that. They can like help you optimize how much tax you need to pay, so them having a much more deeper understanding of what expenses you can claim to therefore like reduce your tax, or at what point you should transition from a sole trader to a limited company because of the different tax structures and how that could save you money. Especially times like now, like in COVID-19, it might be the case that freelancers who are having to work from home where they don't normally, they could actually charge a lot of their house costs over the next few months as business expenses because they're working from home. So asking your accountant those sorts of questions to see, okay, are there additional expenses now that I can claim as business expenses, and how can that help me? So them having a real understanding of those, like what structure is most tax efficient for you, what expenses you can claim, what's the most like efficient systems and processes I can set up to reduce the amount of time I need to spend doing this stuff. And maybe some of them can even help you with chasing invoices and income. If they also have other clients in your sector, they might have a better sense of what other people charge for similar sorts of services, and any anecdotal stories they have from the rest of their clients, and like best practices from other clients that they can share with you. So asking an accountant before you sign up with them, what other clients do you have, and thinking, does that sound like me? Does that sound like a group that I could benefit learning from? Is it usually in like an interesting insight to get? So accountants can help you in so many different ways, and also having one who understands you and you feel like you can trust, and that gives you time, and you have a good relationship with, and you feel comfortable, especially if you don't feel like you're someone who's good with money, you feel comfortable being able to ask them what you think are the silly questions. So feeling like you have like a comfortable and trusting relationship with them is important too.
You mentioned Receipt Bank just
Yes,
then.
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, best app for doing it as you go, you know, every day, getting in the habit.
It's so great. It's so great. Yeah, it's changed my life, Receipt Bank.
Okay.
Do you guys use it?
I use something called One Tap, but the problem with that is that it doesn't add up any of the VAT. So, and I charge VAT, so I have to like go through individually and like figure it out, and it just is really time consuming. But that's been quite good. But it's coming to the end of the financial year, so I'm definitely up for, you know, trying something new. Before it was just like receipts in a shoebox, and then I'd just kind of like dig them out. But yeah, the apps are like a revelation.
I've used Wave, but that's for inputting all of my receipts and earnings, like from my bank statements for when I do my tax return. But I'm not in a position where I'm updating that daily, and I want to get in that habit where I'm putting my receipts for everything I spend into something, and then it makes it easier to do the tax at the end of it. So which do you think is the best app for that?
I mean, it depends on how you work. I've heard good things about Wave, and I've heard good things about Receipt Bank. I do use Receipt Bank every day on the go. Anytime I get a receipt, I just take a picture of it, and it automatically updates to my accounting platform and is attached to the right expense on my accounting platform. So that's the one I use. I've also heard good things about Wave, but I've never used it. That's another good thing with some accountants, is that if accountants have membership or registration with accounting platforms or apps like Wave and Receipt Bank, that's potentially a cost which they don't pass on to you. So you can access those sorts of platforms and apps for free. So ask your accountant.
God, that's so useful. Thank you. I've been trying to jot down all of the recommendations for these apps and websites, and the different 50, 30, 20 saving. Never heard of that. But yeah, we might have to get you to email us the links so we can post them for our audience.
Sure. Yep, I can do that.
And then just lastly, how are you spending isolation, and what plans and projects have you got coming up?
So I'm spending isolation. I'm doing quite a bit of work at the minute, because obviously it's an area that people need help with. So doing a lot of client work for helping people with their personal finances. I'm also, what else am I doing in isolation? I'm decorating, so I'm getting into my home interiors. And I've just converted a camper van. She's called my Evangeline.
Amazing.
She's just been finished, so I just need to sand down all of the wood and varnish the insides, and then do all of the upholstery to the curtains and the sofa. So yeah, finishing my camper van conversion.
That will be so good for the end when you're finally free to be able to go out in it.
Excited.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.